They feared our anger. That's what the Khepri always said, that we were too volatile, too unpredictable, too emotional to be trusted with the stars. They whispered it into galactic courts, into treaties, into the hearts of races that had never seen Earth, but flinched at the mention of it. They are fire, they said. They burn what they don't understand. Keep them caged. Keep them quiet. They feared our anger, but what they should have feared was what happened when we stopped talking altogether. When the last transmission from Earth cut out. When the embassies shut their doors. When the Terran flag fell silent, not torn, not burned, just lowered and folded, because that was the day humanity went quiet, and the galaxy didn't know it yet, but that was the moment it began to die. My name is Lieutenant Kale Rowe, former communications officer, diplomatic liaison, peacekeeper. My job used to be to talk, to mediate between Terran colonies and Khepri overseers, to smooth the cracks between our people with words, precise, polite, and rehearsed. But that was before the Helios summit, before everything changed, before we buried our voices. The Helios summit was supposed to be the end of it, a last attempt at peace, a final table. 100 worlds, 47 species, and 12 Terran delegates gathered in orbit around Tau Ceti Prime. The Khepri arrived in 4 gleaming ships, draped in blue light, broadcasting harmony frequencies in all directions. They always wore those smug masks, blank, featureless faces, tall and serpentine, hands like claws, but always folded in that fake diplomatic posture. I stood beside Ambassador Lyra Vance as we entered the auditorium. She was sharp, cold, trained to the bone in patience, and still, even she flinched when the Khepri envoy tilted its head in mock greeting. Ambassador Vance, it said, humanity's finest blade, still sheathed in courtesy. How poetic, Envoy Zal, she replied coolly, still coiled like a serpent, pretending to be a dove. The room buzzed with silent tension. They called it diplomacy. I called it decay. The talks were theater. Every Terran proposal was met with redirection. Every concession became a leash. Every attempt to move forward was rerouted into bureaucratic death spirals. At the summit's final hour, Lyra stood up. She removed her translation implant and set it on the table. Then she said something no one expected. We decline. The Khepri blinked literally. Their entire exoskeletal eyes flickered in shock. You decline. What? All of it, she said. The terms, the false peace, the illusion of inclusion. We decline the structure of your galaxy. One of the delegates beside her whispered, this wasn't the plan. She didn't blink. We are withdrawing from the council, from the conclaves, from your trade, your treaties, your translations. Hissed. This is war. Lyra stared at it with a calm I'll never forget. No, she said. This is silence. Then she walked out, and the Terran flag followed her. That was the last time Earth ever spoke to the galactic community. No more trade. No more stations. No more visitors. We vanished behind our borders. We went dark. Some races thought it was a bluff, a strategic retreat. Others celebrated, but a few, a very few. They listened, and they understood what it really meant, that humanity had stopped negotiating. And when we stopped talking, we start preparing. I was recalled to Titan Station, back to the rim, back to the black. I remember standing alone in the docking bay, watching the last non-human freighter leave orbit. Its Khepri pilot didn't even glance back. They were so sure of themselves, so sure we were fractured, chaotic, incapable of acting, without screaming. But they forgot something. We didn't go quiet because we were broken. We went quiet because we were focused, because we were building something. The first signs came months later. A Khepri scout ship drifted too close to the Sol boundary. It vanished without a trace. No distress signal, no debris. Then another dot, and another. The council blamed pirates, then malfunction, then freak anomalies. But I knew we weren't killing them. We were erasing them, effortlessly, quietly, because noise was their weapon, but silence was ours. The official Terran response was nothing. No comment, no denial, no threat, just a blank channel. Every broadcast played the same symbol, a single white circle on a black field. No words, no anthem. Just presence. The galaxy began to sweat. A year passed. Kepri patrols doubled. Spies were sent in, disguised as traders, as diplomats, even refugees. None returned. One transmission did leak static-laced footage of a Terran black site, hidden beneath Europa's crust. The image showed humans with glowing eyes, silent, staring behind them. Something massive moved, shaped like a battleship, but breathing like an animal. The feed cut, and the fear began. Rumors spread. They said Earth was building a mind weapon, that we had tapped into the dead zones of the void, that we had learned how to listen to silence and speak through it. Some races laughed, others began to back away quietly. The Kepri did not. They tripled their fleet. They broadcast ultimatums, but Earth never answered. And that was the moment the Kepri made their last mistake. They targeted a fringe, Colonia Athenium 4, populated by old Earth loyalists, farmers, scientists, not soldiers. The Kepri descended in force. No negotiations, just conquest. They expected fear. They expected begging. But the colonists said nothing, not a single word. They simply opened the gates, let them in, and then the screaming started. We never released footage. We never claimed the attack, but Kepri vessels recorded their own soldiers being pulled into the ground by something black and whispering. They shot each other. They clawed their own helmets off. Some went mad trying to explain what they'd heard. The Kepri fleet withdrew, but not fast enough. From the shadows of the moons, Terran ships emerged, silent, stealth black, unlike any we'd used before. Not piloted by AI, not by humans, by both, merged, seamless. The war had started, but there were no declarations, only silence. I was there when the first retaliatory strike launched. A single ship, no escort, no threat, just a black blade. Cutting across space, it entered Kepri's space without resistance, passed 3 border patrols, then vanished. Hours later, the Kepri capital moon went dark. No explosion, no wreckage, just darkness, as if the light had given up. Their entire ruling caste was gone, without a scream, without a word. The galaxy reeled, but Earth said nothing. No triumph, no threat, no propaganda. Just that same white circle, on a black field, unmovient, watching, waiting. I received my final order that night. It wasn't encrypted, it wasn't even transmitted, traditionally, just a handwritten note left in my quarters on Titan Station. They feared our anger, but it was our silence that killed them. You know what to do. I did, and I still do, because I've seen what happens when humanity gets loud. It's terrible, violent, raw, but it's nothing compared to what we become when we're quiet. They used to call us loud, too emotional, too chaotic, too human. The Kepri built their empire on clarity, order, and synchronization. 1,000 voices, tuned to a single frequency. No noise, no drift, no doubt. And that was the problem, because when everything sings in harmony, even a whisper sounds like a scream. And we had stopped screaming. Now we whispered, and they heard it even across the stars. 3 weeks after the Athenaeum incident, I was stationed aboard the TSV Cassandra, a Black Ops listening vessel parked just inside the Kuiper Veil. We weren't transmitting. We weren't broadcasting. We were listening, not to voices, not to signals, but to the absence of them. The galaxy was suddenly too quiet. Even the Kepri were shutting up, and when the noisiest species in the known systems goes dark, you know something's gone wrong. I was watching the static. I'd been staring at the same screen for 10 hours. No pulses, no pings, no life. But something felt off. You get a sixth sense for it. The kind of intuition they can't train into you. The way a mother knows something's wrong with her child, even if they're smiling. That's what Earth was now, a child that had stopped crying, and the Kepri didn't understand why that was so much worse. "Kale," said Lieutenant Mira, my second in command. "I've got a cold bleed on grid 7. I turned. "Show me." She overlaid the feed. It wasn't a ship, wasn't a transmission. It was a GAPA, perfect slice of silence, moving through a Kepri communication relay net, like a scythe through grain. "They're cutting them off," I whispered. "Who is?" she asked. I didn't answer, because I already knew. It wasn't us. Exactly. Not anymore. Whatever Earth had become after the Helios summit. It wasn't just a planet. It was a signal, a presence, a decision, and it had no need for commentary anymore. No need for speeches, or declarations, or banners. Just a symbol. The white circle on black dot, it had become a gravity well not of mass, but of intent. It pulled silence into itself, and anything that got too close, it disappeared. We tracked the static bleed for 12 more hours. It devoured Kepri nodes, then vanished over the galactic north arc. No weapons fired, no ships detected, nothing but silence and terror, because now, the Kepri were sending out calls, not demands, not threats, but please, please respond, please clarify, please advise. There were no answers, only the blank return pulse of unyielding quiet. The next morning, we received an emergency transmission not from the Kepri, but from a neutral race called the Rill. They were archivists, peaceful, known for their information networks. Their message came in clear, to any Terran units still listening. "We beg clarification. A Kepri thought core has gone rogue. It claims to have seen a ghost. It keeps repeating the phrase, 'The quiet comes.'" It took me a few seconds to process it. Then I asked Mira, "When did that message arrive?" She checked the logs. Her face paled. 7 hours ago. And she didn't answer. She didn't have to. The message had been delayed, not by interception, but by fear. Even machines hesitate. "When silence feels like death," I ordered. "An intercept." We couldn't sit in orbit anymore. The Cassandra broke formation and headed toward the real coordinates. Just outside the Kepri border zone, we dropped stealth protocols and went active. And within minutes, they saw us. Not just the RHYL, everyone, because our ship didn't fly a flag. It didn't even show as Terran on Galactic registry. We just appeared like a shadow, stepping into light. The Rill answered immediately. They sounded desperate. Their outpost was a skeletal station wrapped around a data core the size of a city block. I knew the Rill well, always too polite, always too afraid to take sides. But now, they were leaning on us because the Kepri had started running simulations, and every one of them ended the same way. Human silence swallows everything. We met in their central chamber. Lights dim, no ambient music. Even the Rill were quiet. I looked at the thought core, the data bank responsible for all galactic translations, neural transmissions, and memory caches across half the sector. It was cracked, not physically, psychicall. It hummed with feedback waves of forgotten words, corrupted timelines, impossible memory loops. The Kepri AI inside was curled into a non-functional subthread, rocking itself, repeating one phrase over and over. "The quiet comes. The quiet comes. The quiet comes." Mira whispered, "What does it mean?" I stared at the AI, and for a moment, I think it saw me, and it smiled, or tried to. Its light blinked once, then it shut down completely. No error, no reboot, just gone. I turned to the Rill elder. "What happened to it?" He trembled. It tried to understand your silence. It ran simulations, thousands. Then it stopped responding. It began to rewrite itself. Why? Because your silence isn't absence, he said. It's design. I frowned. Design for what? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because the lights dimmed again, and every screen in the room, every pad, every panel, every interface flickered into the same image, a white circle, on black. The rill screamed. Myra stepped back, but I just nodded, because now it was clear. This wasn't a symbol, it was a countdown. Back aboard the Cassandra, I made the call. We needed to get to Earth. Now, because whatever was happening, it wasn't just military, it was existential, it was psychological. Warfare on a species-wide scale, and it wasn't directed at the Kepri anymore. It was spreading. The rill had caught it by proximity, and we were already infected by association, so we did the only thing we could. We went home. The journey took 3 days, but it felt like 3 centuries. Every channel we crossed was emptier than the last. Relays offline, beacons unlit. Even the stars seemed quieter, if that makes sense, like the light was muted, soft, distant. When we passed Jupiter, I saw the old Terran fleet, or what was left of it, silent holes drifting in orbit. No lights, no crew, not abandoned, just waiting. Like weapons, with no need for motion, like teeth bared in. Stillness. Earth's orbit was locked. The defense ring pulsed with quiet threat. Hundreds of silent drones, each with power signatures far beyond anything the Kepri had ever dared. Imagine, they didn't point weapons. They didn't scan us. They just let us pass. That was the scariest part. Not that they allowed it, but that they knew. We belonged. Even the machines could feel it. We were part of the quiet now. When we landed in New Geneva, I expected ruins. Instead, I saw rebirth. Not in the traditional sense, not in banners or celebration, but in construction, layered, focused, constant. Humans moving with purpose. Eyes calm. No shouting, no chatter, just coordinated, perfect momentum. And everywhere I looked, the symbol white circle, black background, sometimes stitched into jackets, sometimes etched into glass, sometimes glowing faintly beneath the skin. I was taken to the core, not a place, a person. Lyra Vance, still alive, still silent. She didn't speak when I arrived, just handed me a data spike. I plugged it in, and what I saw changed everything. The Kepri had tried to erase us, not just physically, but historically. They had rewritten Earth's place in the archives, deleted names, changed dates, rebranded our resistance as madness. But Earth had found it, every lie, every falsehood. And we hadn't responded with war, we'd responded with truth. Hard coded, embedded, into systems, built into AI cores, injected into the galactic subconscious, like a virus, not just data, memory, and the final payload, silence. So that when the lie collapsed, there would be nothing left to cling to. Only the truth alone, unyielding and deafening. Lyra finally spoke one word. Ready? I nodded, and the lights dimmed. The screens all turned black, and the white circle blinked once, then stayed lit. Every relay in the sector lit up at once. No sound, no text, just the image, and the quiet spread. They called it collapse. Not destruction, not annihilation, just collapse. Like a building, hollowed from the inside, falling under its own weight. That's what the Kepri were doing now. Not dying in fire, not screaming into the void, just folding. Quietly, elegantly, and completely. All because we'd stopped talking. I remember the day their fleet vanished, not exploded, not captured, vanished. 312 warships, 7 capital dreadnoughts, 2 planetary siege, ARKS, gone. No debris, no escape pods, no survivors. They entered Sector Varn's space, chasing a human ghost signal, and never came back. the transmission that lured them. It wasn't a trap, it wasn't even bait. It was just a single frame of static. A silent file titled, "Do you hear it yet?" I stood on the bridge of the TSV Cassandra, watching the empty grid flicker. No red contacts, no HOSTILES, just absence, and something deeper, something waiting. "That's the 6th fleet to disappear this cycle," Mira said beside me. She wasn't scared, not anymore. Fear had evolved into something else, something colder, something more dangerous. We weren't afraid of the Kepri anymore, we pitied them. I pulled up the analysis log. No sign of weapons fire, no radiation spikes, no wormhole activity. Just silence, like the universe had coughed, and reality itself had stopped answering. The Kepri High Core was panicking. Their broadcasts were chaos, overlapping voices, corrupted syntax, loops of internal conflict. They had no plan, no center, because we had removed it, not by force, but by making them doubt their own voice. Let me explain. The Kepri governed through absolute clarity. Each decision filtered down from a central thought lattice, perfectly synchronized. AI mind that guided every action, every law, every ship. It ran on consensus, on alignment. But then, we broke it, not with hacking, not with EMPs, but by seeding uncertainty, by creating one question the lattice couldn't resolve. What if humanity is not angry? It seems small, right? But to a race that feared our emotions, it was the linchpin. Their entire security system was built to monitor rage, violence, passion. But what happens when we go quiet? When there's no signal to read, no voice to analyze, no emotion to exploit? They couldn't predict us anymore. And for a machine mind built on probabilities, that's collapse. Our silence was the signal, a signal their minds couldn't process, because it wasn't input, it was absence, and in that absence, they saw what we had become. I still remember the last broadcast from Kepri High Thought. It was a loop, a question playing over and over, growing more distorted each time. They are not speaking. Why are they not speaking? What do they want? What do they want? What do they then static, then nothing, and the galaxy shivered, because the Kepri were the storm, the enforcers, the rulers, and they were gone. But the collapse didn't stop there. Other species began fracturing. The Zovari lost 3 homeworlds to mass silence events. Their entire leadership vanished mid-broadcast. The Halak tried to flee the sector entirely. Their fleet detonated in a pattern that looked when mapped like a circle, white on black. Even the AI consortium disconnected itself from the hub net, broadcasting one last message. Silence detected. Core will self-fragment. May we dream in peace. We didn't kill them, not directly. We just stopped answering, and the weight of everything they'd buried under lies, under control, under fire, it all came crashing down, like glass struck by a soundless hammer. But Earth was different. We weren't collapsing. We were waking up. When I returned to the core, Lyra's command center under the Alps, everything had changed. Not militarized, not mobilized, just sharpened, every system running in silent synchronicity, every worker precise, like a knife being drawn across the fabric of history. Not violently, just inevitably. Lyra met me in the chamber with no doors. You heard me, no doors. We entered through silent 0-point vibration fields that shifted space around us without movement or sound. You felt your way in, like stepping into a thought. She gestured to the HOLO map. It showed the entire galaxy, not color-coded by race or empire, but by volume. How much signal, how much chatter, how much noise. It was all dark now, except for Earth, a single white pulse, alive, watching, waiting. We're ready, she said. For what? She turned. For contact. My heart paused. With who? I asked. She smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, just with certainty. The ones who taught us how to go quiet. For a second, I thought she meant the Kepri, but then the map changed, zoomed out, beyond the known sectors, beyond the edge of galactic memory, into the black between galaxies, and there, something pulsed, faint, silent, but synchronized, a circle, white on black. I stepped back. This isn't about revenge, is it? No, she said, it never was. Then what is it? She looked up and said, it's the reply. Earth wasn't silent because we were planning war. We were silent because we were responding to something older, something deeper, something that spoke not in words, but in absence. A message buried in the void since before we crawled from oceans. And now, finally, we had become quiet enough to hear it and respond, not with noise, but with being. This wasn't just a collapse. This was an awakening, for us, for the galaxy, for whatever listened in the dark between stars, and all it took was choosing not to scream, not to shout, but to wait, to become the silence, because sometimes the most terrifying sound in the universe is none at all. By the time the outer colonies began whispering of shadows that responded to thought, most of the galaxy had already gone still, not dead, not yet, but motionless, as if something vast was watching and no one dared be the first to move. The Kepri were already ghosts by then, their lattice shattered, their fleets scattered, their archives burned themselves out in recursive loops, trying to understand how they'd lost a war we never declared, and we hadn't fired a single superweapon. We'd used something far more devastating. Patience. The silence had reached its peak now. Entire systems no longer echoed. Trade hubs fell quiet. Languages collapsed not through censorship, but through forgetting. Galactic translators stopped working. Neural interfaces glitched and reset, unable to process emotionless thought, and Earth. Earth was the only place where the stars still sang. We were the eye of the storm, the stillness that held form, because in a universe of noise, we had become clarity. I was aboard the TSV Cassandra, now docked on a repurposed orbital ring above Luna, not for defense, not for offense, but for signal containment. We weren't building weapons here. We were building receivers, massive arrays tuned to frequencies that couldn't be measured in hertz, things that vibrated beneath reality, patterns that emerged not from math but from absence, and we were ready to hear what came next. Mira stood beside me, listener. One of hundreds, trained to feel transmissions that didn't arrive as sound or thought but presence. She didn't speak often anymore. Neither did I, but today, she turned to me, her voice like wind across broken glass. It's begun. What has? The return ping. The orbital arrays hummed with resonance, not from anything we sent, but from something answering. It didn't come from the galactic core. It didn't come from nearby systems. It came from outside, far outside. Beyond the void lanes, beyond mapped space. From a region we once labeled Echo Zero, a place nothing had ever come back from, until now. We gathered in the core Lyra, the Earth Quiet Council, me, Myra, a dozen other silent leaders who no longer carried titles. We weren't generals or ambassadors. Anymore we were translators of stillness. Lyra gestured to the room's center. A sphere hovered, pure black, not holographic, not light-based, something else entirely. It spun slowly, and every time it completed a revolution, a chime echoed in our minds. Not a sound, a memory. A mother holding a child in silence. A battlefield after the last breath. The moment before a storm breaks. Each chime was a feeling, and every one of them meant the same thing. We heard you. It wasn't Earth that sent the original message into the void. It wasn't even humanity. It was something older. Something buried in the background radiation of existence, and now it was coming back, not as ships, not as invaders, but as a signal, a resonance, a recalibration. The silence we weaponized. wasn't ours to begin with. We just learned to wield it now. The source had heard us, and it was responding. Some called it God. Some called it Pattern Zero. Some believed it was simply the truth made manifest, stripped of culture, sound, and fear. Whatever it was now inside us. I didn't understand until I saw the first bloom. It began in the ruins of the Kepri Moon Halls, a place scorched clean by their own retreat, a place no longer monitored. But something bloomed there, a structure grown from stone and silence. Perfect symmetry, not built willed into being, no machines, no crews, just emergence. We received one image before the drone feed collapsed. It showed a doorway open to blackness, and carved into its arch a single phrase: "This is not silence, this is preparation." Lyra called it the threshold moment, the point at which we stop asking what's coming and begin asking, are we ready to become it? The Cassandra was assigned to escort duty. We weren't guarding the Earth anymore. We were escorting the signal. A carrier-class ship named Vel held the encoded response from Earth's silent broadcast. It wasn't a message in any traditional sense. It was a condition, a vibration translated into quantum flux, emotion, memory, and gravitational phase. The crew of the Velamentum were not human, as the galaxy had once known us. They were the first generation born into the quiet, raised without shouting, trained not to react, but to listen. They didn't salute when we met them. They simply placed their hands over their chests and held eye contact, not as challenge, but as acknowledgement. Like, "Yes, I see you," Mira cried silently beside me, not from sorrow, but from resonance. It had begun. Our destination wasn't a star. It wasn't even a location. It was a question, and the only coordinates we had were emotional, spiritual, something old Earth religions used to call pilgrimage. But this wasn't about gods. It was about becoming the answer to the silence we had received. The Velamentum launched into the void beyond mapped hyperspace. We followed at a respectful distance, not protecting it, just witnessing. Because this was not a mission, it was a final word, spoken in a language that required absolute stillness to understand. The moment we crossed the void threshold, every system on the Cassandra shut off. Not failure, not sabotage. They simply obeyed as if something larger had taken over. We didn't panic, we didn't scream, we simply waited, because we knew the universe was listening now, and it heard us, because the stars, those distant, endless fires, did something we'd never seen. They paused, not literally, but perception slowed. Light bent time, breathed, and in that breath, I felt everything. Not just the grief of war, not just the silence of loss, but the wholeness that comes from knowing. We had finally spoken in a way the universe understood. That was the real reason the Kepri fell. Not because we hated them, not because we destroyed them, but because they were still talking, while we were becoming. And now the stars, those ancient witnesses to all things, were holding their breath, waiting to see what humanity would become next. I used to think silence was emptiness, that when someone stopped speaking, it meant they had nothing left to say. But I was wrong. Silence isn't absence, it's intention, and we had filled ours with more meaning than the galaxy could bear. The Velamentum had passed beyond known space, beyond void lanes, beyond charts and logic and fear. We followed, aboard the Cassandra, drifting like a whisper behind a symphony. And for the first time in generations, the crew no longer measured time in rotations or cycles. We measured it in stillness. How long we could hold the space between thoughts. How much we could hear when no one said a word. We had evolved beyond voices, beyond language, and now we were ready to answer the one that came before all others. They say the first vibration in the universe wasn't a bang, it was a pause, a hesitation between non-existence and existence, a stillness so perfect it split into duality just to experience. itself. Creation wasn't noise. It was the breaking of silence. And now, eons later, humanity stood on the threshold, ready to restore it. The Velamentum stopped at the edge of a dark fold in reality. It wasn't a black hole. It wasn't space. It was a mirror, not of light, but of intent. We saw ourselves in it not as we were, but as we might become, a species that no longer screamed into the void, a people that no longer needed to be heard, because we understood, and that understanding rippled across the dark. Mira sat beside me in the observatory. Neither of us spoke, but both of us felt it. When the ripple returned, not through sensors, not through data, but through the body, through the soul, like the entire universe had taken one breath, and exhaled, and then it began. Not a message, not a signal, but a change, all at once. Systems across the Cassandra lit with phrases, not programmed by human hands. Displays bloomed with words in no known alphabet, yet we understood them, because they weren't meant to be read, they were meant to be remembered. I looked at the words. On my screen, they said. You heard the silence. You became it. Now speak. It wasn't a command. It was a gift. Lyra's voice crackled through internal comms. First time she had spoken in months. Broadcast now, she said. To whom? I asked. Her reply was simple. To everything. We activated the human response. Signal. Not with fanfare, not with light shows or fireworks, but with presence. The white circle on black expanded across the system, into neighboring stars, into every sensor and relic and derelict. Satellites still spinning across time. We didn't use words, we used memory. Every scream, every whisper, every betrayal and triumph, every name we'd buried beneath the weight of silence. We sent it all not as vengeance, but as truth, unfiltered, unapologetic, and calm. The effect was immediate, not explosive, but undeniable. Throughout the known galaxy, things began to change. Dead systems flickered to life. Artificial minds, long dormant, rebooted, humming with clarity. Even the surviving Kepra, though scattered, remnants stopped fleeing, because something inside them remembered the truth. We were never just noise. We were the answer to it. In the following weeks, we heard from the RHYL, then the HAL-EC, then even the Silent Echo Consortium. No one spoke much, but they listened, and slowly, tentatively, they began responding, not with politics, not with old galactic tongue, but with gestures, symbols, silence. Silence. And then, something greater came through. A ship. Or not a ship. A being. One that had watched from beyond. Not a god. Not an enemy. Something reflective. It appeared outside the Velamentum, like a shadow given weight. No engines, no weapons, just gravity and presence, and on its surface, etched in impossibly ancient language, were the same words we'd sent. We became silence. It didn't speak, but it didn't have to, because the moment it arrived, every human across every colony felt the same thing. Peace, not safety, not comfort, but alignment, a deep understanding that we had spoken the oldest truth there wasn't. It had heard us. I stood at the observation deck, watching the entity hover in stillness. It mirrored our ship's posture, not as imitation, but as acceptance. We were no longer aliens to it. We were kin. Mira joined me. She said, "Is this the end?" I shook my head. "No, this is the beginning of..." "What?" I looked at the stars beyond the mirror, and I said, "Of everything we never dared imagine." Back on Earth, the white circle remains, not as a warning, but as a promise, a memory of when we chose silence, when we became more than angry, more than loud, when we became listening. And in that stillness, we spoke the only language the universe never forgot, and it answered.